Cycling for me has never been about the bikes. They've only ever been the prerequisite tool. I do not see just a bike race, I see riders on heroic journeys and warriors doing battle. At one point, cycling was the most popular sport in Europe because newspapers told magnificent tales about epic races and crafted the great champions into legends. But with the advent of television, cycling lost some of its mystique, and that golden age of journalism and narration has perished. So now let us try to return some romance to the beautiful sport. Let us praise and give glory to phenomenal performances to be remembered for decades to come. Let us dwell on the moments that inspire and move us. Let us chronicle the rise and fall of heroes. Let us chart these life-changing journeys, these cycling odysseys. All right, welcome back to another episode of Cycling Odysseys. I'm your host, Patrick Santino. Today, we are on part 4 of the cyclocross catch-up that we're doing in preparation for the World Championships. If you haven't listened to the other ones, they go in chronological order. There's a bit of a narrative to it, I guess, but not required, but it's good listening, in my opinion. I wrote it, so I'm biased. And if you didn't check out, if you're new to the show and you didn't check out the introductory episodes, or at least the first one, highly recommend listening to that too, so that you can get the feel of what I'm doing. All right, so in this one, we cover the whole Christmas period, which is kind of the 2 weeks, week before, week after Christmas through New Year's, that New Year's weekend basically, and there's always like just packed amounts of cyclocross races. There's usually 8 or 9 in the 2 week period, and people consider it like the cyclocross stage race. I don't know if these people just have, all these towns just have the day off every day of a race, because I think it's usually days off when they would try to host a race and everything. Anyways, it's pretty great. There's always cyclocross to look forward to, because everybody, it's usually, that's always, the week after Christmas is always down week for everybody, so it's like, yeah, of course I want to watch some cyclocross instead of a college bowl game. Let's go. So it's pretty it was pretty great. Lots of eventful things happened too. Gonna recap them here. Cross Catch-Up Part 4, the Christmas Period. As was stated in the last installment, Mathieu van der Poel of Alpecin-Phoenix was supposed to make his cross debut on December 18th at the Huesden-Zolder Cross, but his debut was pushed back by a week because of an accidental crash while out training in Mallorca at a team camp. A crash that supposedly almost ended his cyclocross season altogether. Additionally, this first Christmas period weekend on the 18th and 19th was a strategic breather for Wout van Aert of Jumbo-Visma. Despite, or because of, the absence of the Mighty Aces, the weekend was a thriller. On Saturday it was Huesden, a fair all-rounders test, but its most notable feature was its pinwheel of doom, or spiral of death, whichever term you prefer. Yes, such a dizzying twist made holding one's balance all the harder on this course that was running oh so fast this day. But with a trio of laps left, still a dozen or so riders were in with a shot to win this race, until Paulshausen's Elie Iserbyt ripped it open and started to find separation on the penultimate lap. Only Michael Vanthourenhout, his Paulshausen teammate, was able to hold his wheel for that powerful lap. But on that last lap, riding in third, Tom Pidcock the Grenadier put it into overdrive to close up the gap to Iserbyt that he himself had been unable to stop from forming. Iserbyt's gap on Pidcock was never more than a stone's throw, but so fast was the course it was proving a dire cause for any hope to catch the Paulshausen duo. They passed the pit for the second and last time of the lap and race, and still Pidcock cannot close the gap. But finally, on a flat power section, Pidcock caught and passed a Vanthourenhout who was fading and on his last legs. Iserbyt hit the sandpit that had proven tricky all race, with Pidcock only a few seconds behind. To give out grades, Iserbyt's sandpit was a respectable A-, but Tom Pidcock earned an A+ as he maintained all of his speed across the sand to ride onto Iserbyt's wheel as they came out. Both the longtime rivals were then digging deep and riding well above the course's speed limit. Yes, it was a serious possibility one was about to slip out on a turn for having gone far too fast. Both nailed the staircase, the penultimate challenge. The course then zigged and zagged into the last test of the loop, a usual pair of barriers. Iserbit hit them first and did the usual bunny hops, but somehow Pidcock had managed to carry more speed through the preceding zigzags and passed him on the barriers with a lightning pair of bunny hops. There were 2 more turns in quick succession, and then they were on the finishing straight, where Pidcock had still the speed to finish out the lap in a sprint Iserbit did not even attempt to match. The next day, the exact same cast was towing the line for the Namar World Cup with its drastic and steep elevation changes, dangerous descents, taxing run-ups, off-camber nightmares, and wet and foggy conditions. It was all just as Namar should be. Toonerts of the Belwaz Trek Lions took the early lead with Pidcock, Van Torenhout, and Tormans Quinten Hermans chasing hard. But Toon had an ill-timed puncture a third of the way through the race, and Tom Pidcock took the lead with Michael Van Torenhout on his wheel. Yes, truly over the course of December, Van Torenhout's form was building significantly after a disappointing early season. And though he had faded on the last half lap on the previous day, today, not only did Van Torenhout stay with Tom Pidcock, he put him under pressure. And as Van Torenhout pushed Pidcock, Pidcock himself messed up and crashed on an unrideable technical descent. Van Torenhout then proceeded to hold off Pidcock for the rest of the race to take one of the finest wins of his career, a win oh so very worthy of the Van Torenhout clan. After an exciting opening weekend of the usual intense fortnight of Christmas racing, unusually there was no midweek race on the 22nd or 23rd. And for the upteenth time, yet another strain of COVID was at large and threatening race cancellations. Alas, the rowdy After Dark Deaconham Cross was canceled on the 29th, but on Boxing Day, per tradition, a World Cup cross commenced. Surprisingly, it was not the stalwart Huesden-Zolder Cross, which took place on the 27th as part of the Superprestige series, and instead, it was muddy Dendermonde that was held on the 26th. Who would be in the hunt for this Boxing Day victory? Tough to say, as this was the first day the 3 Kings of Cross, as people were terming them, would square off. Yes, he made his debut, wearing that rainbow jersey that he had won for the 4th time but 11 months ago. And Mathieu van der Poel, the mighty ace, came hot out of the gates. Toonerts jumped out to an early lead again on the first lap, and Mathieu van der Poel went with him. Mathieu van der Poel, the world champion, the mighty ace, was flying once more. Wout van Aert, the other mighty ace, had to scramble and work early in that race to catch up to them. In fact, of the rest of the field, only Wout van Aert was able to bridge up solo to the pair, but firmly he did reach them. And Wout van Aert was not content to simply sit in. Wout van Aert, the mighty ace, attacked the group before even the halfway point of the race, and even the other mighty ace, Mathieu van der Poel, could not follow. Van der Poel did not give in. He could not let his arch-rival set the tempo for the season. Mathieu dug deep and caught up to Wout. But in a reversal of traditional roles, how often has it been Wout chasing Mathieu for so many years? It was Wout van Aert that slowly but comfortably twisted the screw on Mathieu van der Poel to slowly rip open another, and this time insurmountable, gap. By 40 minutes in, all the action was completed. So gassed was the whole field by Wout van Aert, all simply held their position. Mathieu had gotten the face-to-face measure of Wout. Their next meeting would be the very next day. The next day, at the iconic Zolder Formula One track turned cyclocross course, mighty ace Wout van Aert got off to a phenomenal start despite no front row call-up. But mighty ace arch rival Mathieu van der Poel had an uncharacteristic shocker of a start, down some 30 places. Wout capitalized immediately on arch rival Mathieu's struggles, riding away off the front with Toonerts and Quinten Hermans to have a 17-second lead by already the second lap. Meanwhile, behind, Mathieu methodically weaved his way through the field until he was at the pointy end of the chasing group. But on the third lap, as he still led the chase, up one of the steep rises, Mathieu had an accident. His bike may have slipped from under him, and then he was tangled up with those following behind. The crash held him up, took away all his momentum and motivation. Ahead, his arch rival, the mighty ace Wout van Aert, was riding away to move to a dominant 5-0, where none had finished within a metaphorical mile of him. Yes, it seemed to all watching that the psychological battle for worlds was already being waged, and Wout van Aert was thoroughly having it all his own way. Then, about 40 minutes into the cross, Mathieu van der Poel abandoned, citing injuries. And then the news started coming out that very day after the race was completed. The mighty ace, Mathieu van der Poel, had re-aggravated an old back injury at Zolder. Per doctor's orders, he would not race again until the back was fully healed. Meanwhile, a few days later, Wout van Aert lined up at Lowenhout with only a few days' rest. The course was muddy and flat, and over halfway through the race, still 5 men were hanging with Van Aert. But it seems the mighty ace Wout van Aert was only toying with them all, perhaps not overexerting himself during such a packed fortnight of racing. In the last quarter of the race, Van Aert pushed the pace, strung out the field, and snapped the elastic to move to 6-0 on the season. As question marks still swirled around Van der Poel's cross season, all began to wonder if Wout would run the table. As 2022 dawned, Wout's toughest win came about on the traditional New Year's Day cross at Sven-Nyss's training grounds. The course was boggy muddy and running extremely slow. Quickly, it was a 3-horse affair between Wout van Aert, the mighty ace, Tom Pidcock, the grenadier, and Eli Iserbyt, the rider who had been there all season. 35 minutes into the race, Van Aert figured it was time to make his usual winning move that no one else could match. He then proceeded to do just as he figured, and he dropped Pidcock and Iserbyt with seeming ease. And yet, 5 minutes later, coming over a quick descent, turning through a fast section slick with mud, Wout van Aert totally wiped out. He remounted his bike and rode it. It was for just such a reason he had built up a lead. But behind, Pidcock and Iserbyt were notified, and hope was rekindled. Pidcock already had Iserbyt on the ropes for second, and now he had the bit between his teeth to chase down Wout van Aert, the mighty ace. Soon, Pidcock caught Van Aert, who seemed to be suffering or having mechanical issues with his bike. The two went into the pit together, and Tom Pidcock came out significantly faster. In fact, so did Eli Iserbyt. Yes, Wout van Aert, the mighty ace, took around 30 seconds in the pit for he needed to swap out an entirely damaged shoe. It was already the 5th of 7 laps of racing. Surely this would be the end of Van Aert's winning streak, we all thought. But quickly, Van Aert was remounted and riding again, chasing down Pidcock and Iserbyt. He was not going to let this one slip away so easily. By the end of the lap, Wout had already reached Iserbyt, and the two collaborated to chase down Pidcock. Inevitably, Iserbyt was of little use to Van Aert, and Wout had to go solo and eat up Pidcock's 20-second lead for the entirety of that 6th lap. Finally, he reached him, and it was a reset for the 7th lap. But on the muddiest section of the course, where the entire track was a puddly trench that snaked back on itself 3 times, Wout van Aert dropped the hammer. He had been riding the section the best all day. He had clawed back some 6 seconds to Pidcock on that section alone on the previous lap. Now he used it to rip open a lead, and as Van Aert accelerated away, the audience could see Pidcock's defeat in his body language. Tom Pidcock had not the strength or will to mount a final challenge. He could only ride on to maintain his 2nd place. Wout van Aert moved to a perfect 7-0. But all good things must come to an end, or perhaps you are someone who wishes not for Wout van Aert dominance or no dominance at all. That person got their wish the very next day at the Hulst World Cup. Less than a minute into the race, Van Aert had a technical problem with his chain. It took him at least 35 seconds to fix. But unlike the muddy bog that was Sven-Nyss's course yesterday, the ramparts of Hulst were running fast this day. There were a couple muddy sections and a hefty sum of elevation changes on this course, but the men were able to carry so much speed that literal quick work was made up many of these rising colonial grassy rampart fortifications of Hulst. And the speeds with which these riders dive-bombed was truly hair-raising. So, finally today, it was not to be for the mighty ace, Wout van Aert. He had to weave through 50 riders all race, but in the end, he managed to snag 4th place, ahead of Toon Aerts. While out front, it was a good duel between the old rivals Tom Pidcock and Ellie Iserbyt and the European champion Lars van der Haar, who was following well for about half the race until he sunk into a no-man's land 3rd place. Tom Pidcock, once more, got the better of Iserbyt by managing to claw open a 6 to 8 second gap somewhere around halfway, that he then held all the way to the finish. Thus ended the Christmas period racing, and thus ended Wout's winning streak. But at a solid 8-1, surely now was about the time to officially announce his intentions to draw even with his MIA arch rival Mathieu van der Poel in cyclocross world titles at the end of this month in Arkansas. Yo, if you have not looked up the Rufen Pinwheel of Doom or Spiral of Death, you gotta look up Rufen or Ruckfen, Rucphen. Ruckfen. Oh my gosh, that thing's wild. I was showing it, and yeah, somebody in my family, they couldn't. I won't name them. They didn't understand how it was working. But anyways, it was that thing was wild. And then the rest of the course was running fast too. It was a flat course, but it was fun because it was running fast. Like I said in there, I mean, they were testing the speed limits of it on that one, and that was a pretty phenomenal finish from Pidcock. Namar, excellent course ever, always as usual. So great. Racing wasn't supreme this year, but excellent win from Van Tornhout. Well deserved, well earned. And Dendermonde. So it was interesting. I was very interested to hear how this course would go compared to last year, where it was basically all mud and they were all running the entire time. And I don't know. It was a pretty decent course, flat again. And then it was interesting with Van der Poel, but I mean, Wout solidly beat him that day. But I mean, I don't know. Was Van der Poel going to get better? I don't know. And let's see, Zolder, another great course. Very weird it wasn't on Boxing Day. I really like Zolder on Boxing Day, so kind of upset about the change. Not really upset that it left the World Cup, because the World Cup has too many races now. I really don't like that. Luenhout, that course was kind of lame. Flat. Tricky, but it was flat. And Wout was toying with everybody, which was quite the power move. And then GP Saint-Nice, that was a pretty excellent day. That was that goes down as a Hall of Fame Wout win, especially for cyclocross wins. I mean, that one was something else, because Pidcock's the next best in the world right now, and you know he hawked him down, and then he beat him straight up. So that was pretty great. And then Holst, they used a different course last year because of coronavirus lockdowns, but this year that course was cool. Check out, Google Holst, the city in the Netherlands, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's like one of those colonial towns. I don't know if it's colonial or it's Renaissance. It's probably Renaissance. It's probably not medieval. But anyways, it looks like a star fortress. With like a moat, and you could probably have a drawbridge back in the day. And then it's got these grassy hills. You know, you always hear the word rampart in Roman history and stuff. It's like those are real ramparts. Look at Holst, Hulst, Holst in the Netherlands. So cool course there. With that wraps up the Christmas period, and then we move on to part 5, which. Controversial, emotional, big news. You know, I mean, it's all coming. So stick around, stay tuned. Follow the show on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, leave comments, leave 5-star reviews on the podcast things, and subscribe there too for sure. And then follow me on Twitter, Cycling Odysseys. Send me an email, cyclingodysseys@gmail.com. And yeah, thank you for listening, everybody. Vive la cyclisme.